What if I told you the world's most important library wasn't in Paris, London, or Rome, but hidden in the sands of Africa? A city once filled with scholars, gold, and 1,000,000 manuscripts, now forgotten by the very word it enlightened. They say history is written by the victors. But what about the stories buried beneath the sand? In the heart of West Africa, along the sun-scorched edges of the Sahara Desert, lies a city whose name echoes like a whisper through time, Timbuktu. Today, it's a quiet, weathered town in modern-day Mali, but centuries ago, it was the intellectual capital of Africa, a glowing beacon of knowledge that burned brighter than many cities in Europe. Imagine this. Thousands of men in flowing robes, gathering under the open skies. Children reciting verses from ancient texts. Scholars debating astronomy, medicine, law, and philosophy, not in English, not in Latin, but in Arabic, Fulani, Songhai, and Hausa. This wasn't fantasy. This was Timbuktu. But how did such a mighty center of learning vanish from the world's memory? Why aren't we taught that Africa had universities centuries before many in Europe? Why don't our textbooks mention the manuscript of Timbuktu, written in gold ink, preserved in leather, and passed down like treasure? Was it conquest? Colonialism? Or was it something deeper, a fear of what Africa once was? This is the tale they never told us in school. A city that defied stereotypes, challenged narratives, and held the keys to a different African past, one filled with books, not chains. With libraries, not warlords. With thinkers, not just survivors. This is the forgotten city of 1,000,000 manuscripts. This is Timbuktu. It began with a river and the desert. Timbuktu rose quietly along the Niger River's bend, where trade routes kissed the edges of the Sahara. It wasn't meant to be a kingdom, it became something greater, a meeting point of trade, culture, and ideas. In the 13th century, during the reign of the Mali Empire, Timbuktu flourished. The desert that surrounded it didn't isolate it, it protected it. From far and wide came caravans of camels, their backs heavy with salt, ivory, gold, and scrolls. Scholars followed traders. Knowledge followed gold. The city soon attracted the attention of Mali's greatest emperor, Mansa Musa, the richest man to ever walk the earth. In 1324, Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca changed the world. He traveled with a caravan so vast it altered economies across North Africa. But it wasn't just gold he brought back, it was architects, scholars, and books. He returned to Mali and poured his wealth into education, mosques, and manuscript culture. And so, Timbuktu became more than a trade hub, it became a center of enlightenment. Picture this, in mud brick homes, families guarded libraries passed down through generations. Children memorized philosophy beside Quranic verses. Over 25,000 students filled the Sankoré University, debating ethics, law, science, and astronomy. And the manuscripts? They weren't just religious. They covered medicine, math, history, politics, love, agriculture, and even women's rights. This was the real Africa, an Africa of light, not darkness. A continent of thought, not just labor. But empires rise, and they also fall. In 1591, the peace ended. The Moroccan Sultan, Ahmad al-Mansur, driven by greed for Mali's rumored gold and power, sent a heavily armed force across the desert. Muskets against spears. Gunpowder against parchment. The city had never seen such weapons. Timbuktu fell. The Moroccan invasion wasn't just a military conquest, it was a spiritual blow. The libraries were seized. Scholars were imprisoned, exiled, or executed. The city's heart, its knowledge, was torn from its body. Manuscripts scattered in the sand. Libraries looted. Silence where once there was recitation. A city whose power came from books, reduced to a shadow of what it was. The invaders wanted the gold, but they couldn't understand the true treasure, the wisdom held in ink and leather. And so they discarded it. As the centuries passed, colonial powers arrived. The French took control. And again, the myth was rewritten. They told the world that Africa had no history. That it had no written record. That it was a blank slate, a dark continent. They erased Timbuktu from textbooks. They buried its memory, not under sand, but under lies. And the world believed them. But not everyone forgot. In quiet homes, Timbuktu's families hid the manuscripts, in trunks, in attics, in mud walls. Parents passed them to their children with sacred care. A defiant act of preservation. A whisper to the future. We were not ignorant. We were scholars. Today, these manuscripts are being rediscovered. Thousands, still intact. Still glowing with the wisdom of ages. They were not warriors. They were not kings. They were librarians, teachers, fathers, and mothers. And yet, they did what empires could not. They protected the soul of a civilization. When invaders came, when governments fell, and when extremists threatened the very essence of memory, the people of Timbuktu did not panic. They remembered. They remembered the value of the scrolls. They remembered the price of silence. And they acted. For generations, families quietly hid manuscripts in clay pots, chests, underground chambers. They buried them beneath floors and inside walls. Every parchment, every page, a treasure of immeasurable value. Some copied text by hand just in case the originals were destroyed. Others risked punishment or death just to smuggle scrolls out of danger. They weren't just protecting books. They were preserving identity. In the 21st century, a new threat arose. In 2012, Islamist militants seized control of Timbuktu. They deemed the manuscripts heretical. They began to burn. But before the worst could happen, a modern-day rescue unfolded. Led by brave locals like Dr. Abdul Qadiri Haidara, teams of couriers moved over 350,000 manuscripts, one box at a time, out of the city under cover of darkness. They used cars, carts, even canoes. It was one of the greatest cultural rescue missions in history, and the world barely noticed. These guardians didn't wear armor. They carried no swords. But they saved an empire with paper, patience, and love. Thanks to them, today, scholars around the world are rediscovering Timbuktu's brilliance. The manuscripts are being digitized, translated, and preserved, not just as relics, but as living testaments to what Africa was, and still is. Timbuktu's light dimmed, but it never fully went out. The story of Timbuktu is more than the rise and fall of a city. It is the story of what was lost, and what refuses to stay buried. In these ancient manuscripts, written in Arabic, Songhai, Hausa, Tamashek, we find proof that Africa was never silent. It was speaking all along. But the world wasn't listening. Now, it is time to listen. Inside these fragile pages are treatises on astronomy that map the stars before Galileo. Philosophies of governance written when Europe still crowned divine kings. Medical texts that offered herbal cures, surgical practices, and ethical codes long before modern hospitals. Timbuktu did not just store knowledge. It produced it, and today, as we digitize and decode its legacy, we are forced to confront a question too long ignored: what if history, the one we were taught, was incomplete? Africa was never without history. It was without recognition. The tragedy of Timbuktu is not only what was destroyed, but how much was dismissed. For centuries, African voices were silenced in the global story of civilization. But the manuscripts whisper back: we were here. We thought. We built. We remembered. Now, a new generation is rediscovering this power. Not through textbooks written elsewhere, but through their own archives, own scholars, own languages. Timbuktu stands as a reminder that the narrative of Africa was not lost, it was interrupted. And it is ours to finish. So what do we do with this knowledge? We share it. We teach it. We honor it. Because somewhere, a child in Lagos, or Accra, or Nairobi, is being told Africa had no greatness. Let them hear about Timbuktu. The city of 1,000,000 manuscripts may have faded from maps, but not from memory. And now, not from history. Because history is being rewritten, Timbuktu is not just a place on a map. It is proof. Proof that Africa was not silent. That it dreamed, that it wrote, that it led. That beneath the dust of forgotten pages lies a brilliance that once lit the world. The world may have buried the story. But it was never lost, It was protected in secret. It was carried across rivers. It was whispered from father to son, mother to daughter. And now, it is speaking again. Timbuktu challenges everything we've been told about Africa. It reminds us that power is not just held in weapons or wealth, it is held in words, in memory, in stories. And now, it's time we reclaim those stories. Because this isn't just about Timbuktu. It's about Lagos. It's about Accra, Dakar, Nairobi, Kano, Kumasi, Cape Town. It's about a continent whose past was interrupted, but not destroyed. It's about our duty to write it back in, with ink, with pride, with truth. So here's the call: learn, speak, teach, share this story. Let others know what lay beneath the sand. Because if we don't tell our stories, others will, and they will get them wrong. Let this not be the end of Timbuktu's story. Let it be the beginning of Africa's renaissance. Let it be remembered. Let it be honored. Let it be told. And if you believe this history deserves to be known, subscribe to this channel, Tale of Timbuktu, and help us uncover the truths they try to erase. More stories are coming. More voices will rise. Together, we will reclaim Africa's legacy, one tale at a time.